My name is Emily Carter. I'm 28 years old, and I still remember that moment as clearly as if it happened this morning. The moment my life changed direction forever and without a way back. That day, I fell. But not every fall is an accident. I fell because the floor was slippery. But the floor wasn't just slippery, it had been made that way, on purpose. And as I lay there, paralyzed on the cold concrete, unable to move my legs, my brother Brandon stood over me, laughing. My father, Richard, yelled, "Get up! Stop being dramatic!" And my mother, Deborah, leaned in, whispering with venom, "You're ruining your brother's birthday party." I begged them. I actually begged them. I couldn't feel anything below my waist. I needed help, but no one cared. Not a single person in my family believed me. Not even for a second. To them, I was always the weak one, the dramatic one, the girl who faked pain for attention. And that belief, that deep, cruel bias, it made them criminals because their neglect wasn't just indifference. It was violence in silence. It was abandonment wrapped in family ties. If you're watching this and you've ever felt like me, alone, unseen, in your own home, leave a comment below. I see you, and I understand. I didn't go to that party because I wanted to. My mother begged me to come for Brandon's 31st birthday. I'd been distant from them for years, and every return felt like reopening an old wound. But this time, I thought, maybe they've changed. Maybe this time will be different. I was wrong. Brandon, like always, was the center of attention. His friends, his stories, his beers, his laughs. I was a shadow, a name on the guest list no one asked for. And when I decided to leave, that's when the nightmare began. I slipped. I fell backward. My back and head slammed against the edge of the pool. The crack inside my skull, like thunder. And then, silence. I opened my eyes. Blue sky above me, but no feeling from the waist down. And in that moment, I knew, this is real. I whispered, hoarse and broken. I can't move my legs. Please, call an ambulance. Brandon looked down and laughed. Classic Emily, still performing, huh? My father shook his head in disgust. Get up. Don't embarrass this family. My mother bent down, voice cold and tight. Enough. You're humiliating us. Everyone's watching. They left me there, in pain, in fear, in total despair. No one called 911. No one came near me. Until one woman, Lindsay, a trauma nurse, stepped in and said, "I'm an ER nurse. Everyone move." She was the one who called the ambulance. She was the first person to believe me. When my own family refused, as they rolled me out, I looked back. Brandon stood frozen, my father yelling at the paramedics for blowing things out of proportion, my mother fixing her hair, smiling at guests like nothing happened. I left that house with a broken spine. But for the first time in my life, I also left it with the truth. I don't belong there. That day, I didn't just lose my ability to walk. I lost every last illusion that my family might ever change. None of them loved me enough to believe me. None of them had the courage to say, "I'm sorry." And that cowardice stole the life I thought I had. But I'm still here. I'm still breathing. And I still have a voice. I'm not sharing this story for pity. I'm sharing it to prove that you can survive, even when the world tries to convince you you're not worth saving. If you've ever been doubted while in pain, if someone's ever called you dramatic when all you needed was help, then stay with me through this series. I'll tell you everything, from that night to the legal battle and the long road I took to learn how to stand again in a different way. Some falls don't just hurt, they wake you up. And from the ashes, you can rebuild yourself if you dare. If you saw yourself in my story, leave a comment below, hit like, and subscribe. I can't change the past, but I can share it so you know you're not alone. And I hope you'll stay because this is just the beginning. From the outside, my family looked picture perfect. A two-story white house in the Boston suburbs, freshly cut lawn, a shiny SUV parked neatly in the garage, a father who was a respected senior accountant at a financial consulting firm, a mother who wore floral dresses, arranged flowers, baked cookies like something out of Better Homes and Gardens, a son who played sports, aced his classes, and was adored by teachers and friends. And then there was me, the quiet daughter, always on the edges of the family photos. People would say, Emily's family is so lucky, two good kids, model parents. I heard that my entire childhood, and every time I wanted to scream, you have no idea. Because behind the locked doors of that perfect house were cold rules, sharp favoritism, and a kind of love that came with terms and conditions. Love you only earned if you were perfect enough. My father, Richard Carter, was a large man, broad shoulders, a jaw like granite. He believed emotions were the enemy of success. He once told me, feelings are a luxury only failures can afford. So I learned to clench my teeth instead of cry. Every time I scraped my knee or broke my heart, his response was the same. It's nothing. Get up. Toughen up. Not because he hated me, I don't think, but because he didn't know how to love. Or maybe he just didn't believe I deserved it. My mother, Deborah, lived in fear, not of the dark or of monsters, but of disappointing Richard, of shattering the image of the perfect family he worked so hard to maintain, of anything that fell out of line. If I told her I was sad, she would whisper, "Don't say that too loud. Your father won't like it." If I cried because Brandon bullied me, she'd wipe my tears, then immediately whisper, "You need to learn to ignore it. He didn't mean it. Don't make things complicated." In that house, silence was golden, and truth was folded and locked away in a drawer. And Brandon was a saint, at least in my parents' eyes. He was 3 years older, and from the moment I was born, I lived in his shadow. He was the first to ride a bike, the first to win a trophy, the first to bring home a girlfriend. And every time, Dad would celebrate him like he'd just gotten into Harvard. And me, even when I got better grades, even when I joined every club I could, all I ever got was a cold nod. Brandon learned fast. He could get away with anything, as long as he kept up the image of the perfect son. He mastered the art of lying, manipulating, blaming others. And every time I was the one left holding the pieces. I remember once when I was 6, I slipped on the back steps and tore my knee open. Blood trickled down the brick path. My hands trembled. I stood, grabbed the door frame, and called for my mom. She opened the door with concern, but when she saw Brandon standing behind me, her expression changed. I told her Brandon pushed me, that I didn't fall on my own. But Brandon, with that effortless smile, simply shook his head. "She's clumsy. I was just trying to help her keep her balance." My mother looked at my bleeding leg, then said, "It's okay. Girls need to be more careful. Go clean it up." And my father, Richard, he muttered one sentence: "Don't make a scene over something so small." I walked upstairs, tears streaking silently down my face. I thought, at the very least, that getting hurt would make someone believe me. But in our house, truth was always edited to protect Brandon. My brother understood that better than anyone, and he used it to the fullest. When I was 7, he told me the neighbor's dog had rabies. I believed him. Brandon put on a serious face, said the dog had bitten a kid, that it went wild when it smelled blood. I didn't step outside for nearly a week. I didn't go to school. I didn't play with anyone. I stopped sleeping, dreaming of getting bitten and dying. When my mother found me hiding under the bed every time a dog barked, she scolded me. "Stop making a big deal out of nothing. Brandon's fine, so what's your excuse?" I wanted to scream because he made it up, but I knew no one would listen. When I was 10, I built a solar system model for my science class. I spent 3 weeks carefully painting each planet by hand, labeling them, spacing them out with precision. The night before it was due, Brandon walked into my room. I didn't think much of it. A part of me still believed maybe this time he wouldn't ruin it. The next morning, I woke up to find Jupiter crushed, Saturn gone, glue spilled across the entire base. I screamed. I cried. I tried to tell my mom. Brandon just smiled and said, "Maybe it was the cat. She always leaves her door open." My dad didn't care who was right. He simply frowned and said, "Next time, plan better. Backups are key to any project." And my mother sighed, cleaning up the mess while muttering, "It's always some drama with you over the smallest things." That's when I started to truly understand that in their eyes, I was the problem. And Brandon, just the perfect son who occasionally got a little mischievous. The cruelest part, I believed them. I believed I really was difficult, too sensitive, that if I were just better, quieter, nicer, more obedient, maybe they'd love me the way they loved him. When I was 12, Brandon locked me in the basement. It was raining. The power had gone out. I'd always been afraid of the dark. I told him that more times than I could count. But to Brandon, my fears were entertainment. He lured me down to look for a watercolor set, then slammed the door shut, locked it. I screamed. I pounded on the door. I scratched the paint off with my nails until they tore. I don't know how long I was down there. 2 hours? 4? When he finally opened the door, he acted surprised. "Oh, you're still here? I totally forgot." I told my parents. I couldn't stop crying. My father put down his newspaper and said, bored, "She's making things up again." My mother took me by the hand and pulled me into my room. "Don't make this worse. You're only disappointing your father even more." Silence became my survival strategy. I learned that the more I spoke up, the further I drifted from the scraps of love I still hoped to earn. And I, a child, needed love more than I needed justice. So I stayed silent. I swallowed my tears. I hid the bruises. And I told myself, if I can just get through these years, maybe one day it'll get better. At 16, I scored the highest grade in my chemistry class. I brought the test home, excited. For the first time, I thought maybe, just maybe, Dad would say, "Well done, Emily." But when I handed it to him, he barely glanced and muttered, "That's what you're supposed to do. Nothing to be proud of." That same night, Brandon destroyed my science presentation. Again, another model. This time, I didn't cry. I just looked at him. He smiled and said, "Why haven't you given up on all this school crap yet?" I left home the moment I could. I chose a college in another state, told them I wanted independence. But the truth, I just wanted escape. I didn't need much, just a place where, when I said, "I'm hurt," someone would believe me. And you know what? Physical wounds, skinned knees, bruised arms, they heal. And the wounds that come from being dismissed by your own family, those don't just fade. They seep into your bloodstream, your voice, the way you look at yourself in the mirror every morning and ask, "Am I exaggerating? Do I even deserve to be cared for?" I lived nearly 2 decades with that question, and even after leaving home for years, I still carried it, like a silent shadow clinging to my every step, until the day I returned home for Brandon's 31st birthday. And in that one final moment of indifference, they gave me my answer. 6 months. That's how long it had been since I'd seen them. 6 months since I last heard my mother, Deborah, say my name with that voice of forced cheer and guilt. "It would mean so much if you came to Brandon's birthday. We all miss you." I should have said no. I had already written 3 polite excuses. Work trip, health issues, a getaway I couldn't cancel. But when she added, "It's a special day for your brother. You know that." I nodded, even though I knew Brandon didn't want me there, even though I knew there was no place for me at that party, except to be the forgotten shadow in the background, even though I knew that every visit home felt like returning to a battlefield where I was always the defeated. But I still went, because some fragile, foolish part of me, even at 28, still believed maybe this time will be different. I booked a hotel near the house instead of staying in my childhood room, partly out of pride, partly out of survival. I packed carefully, choosing an outfit that might please my father, Richard, but still felt like I wasn't wearing armor. I told myself, just a few hours. Smile, gift, goodbye, keep it simple. I rehearsed every grounding technique my therapist had taught me. Deep breaths, set boundaries, and if it becomes too much, leave. No need to explain, no need to ask for permission. I was prepared, at least, for everything except the cruelty of people. I arrived at 2 p.m. sharp, party time. The backyard was already full, laughter, beers, grilling, stories being retold that I had never been part of. I stepped inside and saw my mother. She looked me over like she was inspecting merchandise, then gave a slight nod of approval. "That outfit's decent. Your father will be pleased." She gestured toward the yard. "Brandon just finished opening his gifts. Go on out." The envelope I brought, $200 in cash, sat quietly next to massive boxes, a new golf set, designer clothes, a jet ski key. Yes, a literal jet ski. I looked at the picture taped on the gift box, the exact model he'd once posted on Instagram. My mother smiled. "Your father's having it delivered next week. He's wanted that one for a while." I nodded, swallowing the familiar sting. I remembered my own 28th birthday, just 6 months ago, when they sent me a generic store gift card. No message, no call, and I told myself, "It's fine. You're an adult now. Don't take it personally." Out in the yard, Brandon was surrounded by friends, many of whom haunted my childhood nightmares. Chad was there, the boy who once spit in my hair when I was 13, now laughing and raising his beer with Brandon. Brandon spotted me and walked over. He hugged me too tightly. as if to remind me his body was still bigger, stronger, more dominant. Didn't expect the little sis to show. Color me surprised. I smiled faintly. Happy birthday, Brandon. He pointed to the new wood deck circling the pool. Dad spent almost 20 grand on that. Brazilian hardwood, custom order. He really spoils me, huh? I excused myself to grab a drink. No alcohol, no beer. I knew better. This place was at its most dangerous when your guard was down. I stood with a few of Brandon's friends' wives, quiet women, cautious smiles. Together, we formed a little cluster of nameless outsiders, but the air was getting heavier. Brandon was about to put on a show. He started telling stories, the jokes from our childhood, the ones only I never found funny. Remember when we told Emily the neighbor's dog had rabies? She freaked out so bad she didn't leave the house for a week. Everyone laughed. I forced a smile. Inside, I felt like throwing up. Chad chimed in. Or when we switched her shampoo with hair removal cream. Her hair fell out in clumps. She wore hats for months. I said nothing. I began to gather my things. There was no reason strong enough to make me stay in this. But Brandon stepped in front of me. There was alcohol on his breath. Leaving so soon? Come on, it's fun. Stay a little. I tried to move past, but he didn't budge. Why are you always like this, Emily? Still the same stiff little weirdo who doesn't know how to take a joke. I looked him dead in the eyes. I have the right to leave. I stepped onto the new wooden deck, the part connecting the house to the pool. Just a few more steps and I'd be gone. But the floor, it was strangely slick. And then I felt it. My foot slipped. Not the kind of slip that happens from rain or new shoes. It was too smooth, too deliberate, like something had been applied on purpose. My instincts told me to stop, but it was too late. One foot shot forward, the other lost balance. My body tipped backward. I saw the sky spin. I saw the clear blue of a summer afternoon. I saw faces turning, too slow to react. And then, crack. My back and head slammed against the concrete edge of the pool. A sharp explosion went off inside my skull. Not a sound, but a jolt, a shock wave, the kind that turns the world to static. I opened my eyes. The sky was still blue, the breeze still warm, but my body was gone. I couldn't feel anything from the waist down. I tried to move my toes. Nothing. Tried bending my knees. Nothing. My breath turned shallow. My hands trembled. Help me, I whispered, the words barely audible, like air slipping from a dying balloon. I can't feel my legs. Then Brandon appeared above me. He crouched down, a grin on his face, like he was watching a scene from a comedy. He laughed, laughed. Wow, Emily, that fall deserves an Oscar. Then he turned to Chad. She's still at it, huh? Always the drama queen. I stared into his eyes. There was nothing brotherly there. Just the empty gaze of someone who doesn't even realize they've become the villain. I spoke again, louder this time. I'm serious. I can't move. Call an ambulance. No one moved. They stood there, staring at me like I was a broken puppet. My father, Richard Carter, finally walked over. He looked down at me, cold and annoyed, as if I'd just spilled wine on his expensive rug. He glanced at the deck, then back at me, his voice sharp and dismissive. This deck's brand new. It's perfectly safe. Get up. Stop being dramatic. Those words cut deeper than any injury, not because he yelled, I was used to that, but because in his eyes, My paralysis was less believable than the polish on that goddamn wood. My mother, Deborah, approached slowly, scanning the crowd, not to check on me, but to see if anyone else had noticed. She knelt down, careful not to let her dress touch the ground, then leaned close and whispered, "Emily, that's enough. Don't ruin your brother's day." I screamed. For the first time in years, I screamed. "I'm not pretending. I can't move. I need to go to the hospital." My mother went pale, not from concern, but from embarrassment. She gripped my arm and hissed, "People are watching. Do you want to humiliate this family?" And I cried, not from pain, but from despair. Because even in the moment I needed them the most, they were still them, cold, distant, more concerned with appearances than their own daughter's life. And Brandon, the one who had caused it all, was still sipping beer and laughing with his friends. No guilt, no recognition, not even a flicker of responsibility. Then the dizziness hit. My breath came in gasps. A wave of nausea surged up my throat. I turned my head and threw up onto the deck. A disgusted snort behind me. "She's drunk. Probably snuck some drinks," Brandon muttered, half mocking, half amused. But no, I hadn't had a single sip. I was sober, painfully sober. And maybe that's what made it worse. I was fully aware that I was being left behind. I started to tremble. Cold seeped through my bones. My fingers went numb, my vision blurred. I stammered, "Please, someone, help me." And then, from the edge of the crowd, a woman's voice. It wasn't familiar. It wasn't part of the family playbook. "Excuse me, I'm a nurse. Make room." The crowd parted like someone had shouted fire. A woman in her 30s, hair tied back, sharp eyes full of concern, knelt beside me. "What's your name?" she asked, already checking my pulse, shining a light in my eyes, her hand steady on my shoulder. "Emily," I whispered. I can't feel anything below my waist." She didn't panic. She didn't dismiss me. She just nodded and said firmly, "You may have a spinal injury. I'm calling an ambulance." My mother rushed over, panic written all over her face. "She's fine. Maybe just overreacting. We'll take her to a doctor later." The nurse, Lindsay Hall, I'd later learn, didn't flinch. "You're not a doctor. I'm an ER nurse at Massachusetts General. If this isn't handled correctly, your daughter could end up permanently paralyzed. Are you prepared to live with that?" My mother froze. Lindsay pulled out her phone, dialed, and spoke rapidly. "Female, 28, immobile from the waist down after fall onto concrete edge. No sensation, nausea, cold skin. Emergency transport needed." My father finally approached, for once visibly shaken. "You can't call an ambulance from my house without my permission." Lindsay didn't even glance at him. She focused on me. "Emily, stay with me. Can you still feel your hands?" I nodded weakly. "Good. Don't move. Help is on the way." My mother stood stiffly, arms crossed, eyes darting toward the whispering guests. Brandon stayed back, several feet away, silent now, and for the first time, I saw it, real fear in his eyes. 10 minutes later, the ambulance arrived. 3 paramedics, 2 women, 1 man, rushed in with a stretcher and medical kits. They asked my name, where the pain was, checked reflexes, no response from either leg. I heard one of them whisper to the other, "Could be T12 or L1. Alert the hospital. Prep for possible surgery." Everything moved like a hurricane. Just before they lifted me onto the stretcher, one of the EMTs asked Lindsay, Was it just a slip or anything suspicious? Lindsay looked down at the wood deck, knelt, touched it, then brought her fingers to her nose. She frowned. Not water. Smells like oil. Wood treatment, maybe. Very slick. Brandon inched away. One of the EMTs turned. Who was the last person to interact with the patient? No one answered. They didn't need to. Every eye turned toward Brandon. They strapped me onto the stretcher, braced my neck, secured every limb. I stared up at the sky, the same sky I'd looked at when I fell. But now everything was different. I knew one thing for sure. If Lindsay hadn't been there, I wouldn't be alive to tell this story. Not because of the fall, but because my own family would have let me die on that deck, like I wasn't worth saving. That's when I understood. Neglect isn't just coldness. It's a form of violence, a crime dressed up as etiquette, reputation, and the sacred title of family. I woke up in a stark white room, the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor tapping out a new reality. No barbecue smoke, no cruel laughter echoing over my pain, just beep, 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 and a deep ache down my spine, like my body no longer belonged to me. I tried to sit up. Even moving my head sent bolts of pain crashing through my body. A nurse, Marcus, gently laid a hand on my shoulder. Emily, you're at Massachusetts General. You were brought in just before midnight. Do you remember what happened? Remember? I remembered every laugh, every dismissive stare, every knife-shaped word that cut into me like a blade. Get up. Stop being dramatic. You're embarrassing the family. You just want attention. I nodded. I fell, and then I couldn't move my legs. Marcus's voice softened. That's right. You suffered a spinal injury. The doctors performed emergency surgery to relieve pressure on your spinal cord and prevent further damage. The surgeon will be in soon. A few minutes later, a middle-aged woman in a white coat walked into my room. Her hair was streaked with silver at the temples. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, unflinching. Hello, Emily. I'm Dr. Susan Blake, neurosurgeon. I performed your surgery. I clenched my fists into the sheets. So, what exactly happened to me? She sat down. No sugarcoating, no soft lead-ins, and maybe that honesty was what made it feel more real than anything else in the last 28 years. You suffered an incomplete spinal cord injury at T12, the junction between your thoracic and lumbar spine. Two vertebrae fractured, placing significant pressure on the spinal cord. We removed the bone fragments and placed stabilizing rods to support your spine. But, she paused, just for a beat, you are currently paralyzed from the waist down. This could be temporary, but it could also be permanent. Everything blurred, not from pain, but from the hope inside me collapsing like my vertebrae on the edge of that pool. Permanent. For how long? No one can say for sure, she replied gently. What's important to note is that if you had been brought to the hospital sooner, the chances of recovery would have been significantly higher. I turned my face away, not because I was ashamed, but because I was angry. Not at her, at the people who should have called 911 when I lay shaking on that deck, begging like a child left behind. That afternoon, two women in police uniforms knocked on my hospital door. They introduced themselves as Detective Grace Turner and Officer Naomi Lynn. We're investigating the incident that led to your injury, Turner said. Could you tell us exactly what happened at the party? I looked at them. And for the first time in years, I felt like someone was asking not to challenge me, but to listen. I told them every detail, how Brandon blocked my way, how I stepped onto the deck and felt the strange slickness beneath my shoes. The fall, how my parents refused to call for help. Brandon's laughter, my father's cold dismissal, my mother's whispered shame when she knelt beside me and said, "You've ruined your brother's birthday." Officer Lynn took notes, her eyes twitching at moments I suspected she was barely holding back anger. "There's a witness, Lindsay Hall, the nurse on scene, who confirmed you had no sensation from the waist down," Turner added. She also stated that the wood deck where you fell had a slippery oil coating. Wood treatment applied improperly. I nodded. "Brandon, my brother, he said it was a prank." The two officers exchanged glances. "Thank you for your statement," Turner said. "We've collected evidence from the scene. We'll be in touch soon." I used to think justice was something clean, a relief, a courtroom verdict, a guilty party led away in cuffs, and then I'd feel whole again. But real life isn't that neat. Justice, if it even exists, arrives long after the damage is done, after trust is dead, after your emotions are drained like a dried up well. I learned that truth as I sat in my wheelchair in court, watching Brandon, my brother, lower his head before the judge and plead guilty to reckless endangerment resulting in serious bodily harm. He didn't say much. Let his lawyer read the statement that it was a joke taken too far, that he didn't anticipate the consequences, that he was deeply sorry. I couldn't tell what part of sorry was real. Maybe he was sorry for getting caught. Sorry the world saw him as something other than the golden child. Or sorry, the civil lawsuit was draining every penny of his inheritance. The judge delivered the sentence: 2 years in prison, no parole. The gavel came down, but inside me, nothing moved. My parents, Richard and Deborah, weren't charged criminally like Brandon, but they were investigated for failure to aid during a medical emergency. I expected them to deny everything, to slip into their well-rehearsed roles as shocked parents with an unstable daughter. But they didn't. Faced with irrefutable evidence, the surveillance footage, Lindsay Hall's testimony, the oil stains on the deck, the hospital records, my statement, they went silent. Not the kind of silence of the innocent, but the kind of silence that knows it's too late to undo the damage. The court ordered 12 months of probation, 300 hours of community service, mandatory individual and family therapy for no less than 18 months. I heard their attorney speak after the verdict. The Carter family expresses deep regret and hopes for reconciliation. Reconciliation? Did they think this was a scratch? A minor misunderstanding between relatives? If I could have stood up, I would have, and said, "There's no reconciliation when you've spent your whole life as the invisible shadow in the family portrait. There's no healing when the person who caused your pain still gets to call you daughter or sister without ever being held accountable." Immediately following the criminal trial, my lawyer, a tough-as-nails woman named Clara Maddox, sat me down and said, "Emily, if you don't file a civil lawsuit, you won't have the means to support yourself long term. The medical system, insurance, government aid, they won't be enough. I know this hurts, but you need to think ahead. We're not suing for revenge. We're suing to survive." I sat with that for a long time. Filing a civil suit isn't like a criminal trial. You're not just holding others accountable. You're putting a price tag on your pain. How much for a fall? How much for legs that may never feel the ground again? How much for a body that will never be whole? How much for a family that once was and now is just a name on court documents? We filed for $5 million in damages, including lifetime medical and rehab care, medical equipment, power wheelchair, and home modifications, loss of income due to career disruption, emotional and psychological damages, long-term caregiving and support. My family pushed back hard. They hired high-powered attorneys, tried to spin it as an unforeseeable accident, tried to paint Brandon as a good young man who made a mistake, tried to frame me as the unstable daughter who always wanted attention. I didn't flinch. I let Clara bring in the evidence, the recording of me begging for help and being ignored, Lindsay Hall's sworn testimony, the forensic report showing deliberate oiling of the deck medical records, confirming acute spinal trauma from direct impact. When the trial ended, the judge ruled the Carter family must pay Emily Carter $4.8 million in damages. Part of it would be covered by their liability insurance. The rest came from personal assets, their suburban home, their vacation cabin, their investment portfolios, their savings. I knew, to them, this was a devastating loss. But to me, it was the smallest possible price for having to rebuild an entire life from scratch. When I got the official notice that the settlement funds had been placed in a trust account managed by Clara, I sat in my rehab apartment, hands on my laptop keyboard, and typed only one sentence. I didn't win, I survived. People ask me if I felt satisfied. I didn't. Satisfaction is what you feel when justice brings you peace. I didn't feel peace. I felt empty. The kind of hollow that lives so deep inside you, you can't tell if you're standing or sitting. The kind of emptiness that comes from losing faith for so long, that even justice can't touch the part of you that already died. One afternoon, I received a handwritten letter from my mother. I was surprised. She had never written to me before. Inside the envelope were a few lines in blue ink. I don't know where to begin. I was wrong. I was weak. And I failed to protect you the way a mother should. If you can't forgive me, I understand. But I want you to know, I'm sorry. I read it 3 times. Then I set it down. No tears, no anger, no emotion. Just one thought. Too late. Forgiveness isn't what I'm chasing anymore. I'm not living my life waiting for apologies. I'm living to save myself from whatever of them still lives inside me. The day Brandon was transferred to state prison, the media barely noticed. Just a single headline: son of prominent Carter family sentenced to prison for severely injuring his sister. They called me sister. Not a single one asked my name. Not one asked what I'd lost. But I no longer expect anyone to ask. I'll tell it when I'm ready. And the story will be mine, written with what I still have left: my voice, my memory, and the truth they can't bury anymore. A social worker came to visit me. His name was Marcus, the same man who greeted me that first morning. "We're developing a rehabilitation plan for you," he said. "You'll likely be transferred to a specialized recovery center once you're stable." I asked quietly, "How long until I can walk again?" He didn't answer right away. He only said, "We'll do everything we can to help you live independently, whether that's on your feet or in a wheelchair." I was moved to the rehab center 3 weeks after surgery. It sat in a quiet coastal town, far from anything familiar, far from the house soaked in cold memories, far from the pitying stares of people who knew me, far from the ones who once called me family, then turned their backs when I needed them most. My room was on the first floor. The window looked out to a small garden where soft lavender bloomed. The staff were kind, but no one coddled me. They understood I didn't need sympathy. I needed to rise in my own way. My first therapy session started at 7 a.m. I hadn't even gotten used to the back brace yet, and I was already being wheeled in front of a mirror in the rehab gym. That's when I truly saw my body, thinner, pale, motionless from the waist down. Half of me no longer responding. My physical therapist's name was Monica, a tall black woman whose voice carried the warmth of someone who'd earned every ounce of patience. "Emily," she said, "we're going to start with breathing." I let out a bitter laugh. "I thought you were here to teach me how to walk." "To walk," Monica replied, "you first have to remember you're still alive." So I learned day by day, hour by hour. I learned how to transfer from bed to wheelchair without help, how to pull on pants with one hand while balancing with the other, how to slide myself up from the floor using grab bars, how to read the pain signals in my body I used to ignore. But what I never expected to relearn was this: trust, not in others, in myself. There's one exercise I'll never forget. Monica placed me in front of a large mirror, surrounded by resistance bands, braces, pulleys, and adjustable weights. She handed me a stretch band. "Try to hold your balance while pulling it back." I managed 3 reps. Then my back spasmed. I tilted, I slid, I fell, right onto the mat. I clenched my jaw, didn't cry. Monica didn't rush over. She sat down beside me. Hands folded, eyes calm, no pity in sight. "Do you know what just happened?" she asked. I stayed quiet. "You fell, and you didn't die. You didn't panic. You didn't blame anyone. You just took it. That's the first thing a survivor learns." I didn't respond. I couldn't stop the tears. Physical recovery, at least, has a roadmap. You follow instructions. You show up. You use the tools. You improve, slowly, but you improve. But emotional pain, it follows no timeline. At night, after lights out, I'd lie in my quiet room, staring at the ceiling, and replay the voices. "Don't be dramatic." My father. "You ruined your brother's birthday." My mother. "Still doing the whole victim act, huh, Emily?" Brandon. Those voices never stop. They echo in my head like background noise no one asked for, but never shuts off. I grew up believing the innocent lie. Family is the one place you can always come home to. But what I didn't know was some homes, even with full dining tables, warm lights, and cheerful laughter, are colder than any basement. I lived in one of those places for almost 30 years. Once physical therapy became part of my routine, I began a far harder journey, the journey inward. That's when Sophia, the trauma therapist at the center, entered my life as gently as a passing breeze. No pressure, no intrusive questions on day one, just presence, steady and dependable, like the morning light through a window. She never told me I needed to forgive. She never preached about letting go. She simply created space, a space where for the first time I could speak without being judged. "Emily," She asked one crisp fall morning. When you think of your childhood, what's the first image that comes to mind? I didn't answer right away. Then, like an old film reel rising from the depths, I saw it. Me, crouched in a corner of the living room, back pressed to the wall, covering my ears, trying to disappear as my parents screamed at each other. I said just one sentence: the feeling of being lost. In my own home. Sophia nodded gently. And do you think that was your fault? I didn't hesitate. Yes, I believed that nearly all my life. I used to catalog every small flaw of mine like I was building a case against myself. Why wasn't I a better little sister? Why didn't I get better grades to make them proud? Why was I so sensitive, so emotional, always asking why? Why couldn't I just stay quiet, like they wanted? I carried every one of those questions like stones in my chest, sinking deeper every time I tried to stay afloat. And then one day, Sophia simply said, "You were abused, not because you were bad, but because others didn't know how to love." I used to scoff at the idea of chosen family. It sounded romanticized, delusional, like a fairy tale people told themselves to feel less abandoned. But over time, I began to understand. Family in the end isn't about titles or blood. It's about this: who stays when you have nothing left to give? I had Lindsay, the nurse who called 911 that day, who later visited often, bringing homemade cookies and asking what I needed. She never asked about the past. She only focused on the present. Did you sleep okay? Are you hungry? Want to come sit in the garden with me? Simple questions, but to me, they were magic. I had Monica, the physical therapist, who stayed after her shift to help me learn how to slide from my chair to the bed with only one arm. She looked at me like I was strong, even when I didn't believe it myself. I had Sophia, who sat quietly while I cried and only asked what I wanted to say once the tears had passed. She never told me to stay strong. She only said, "You're allowed to be fragile. No one gets to take that from you." And then I had Noah. He was a volunteer reader at the center, mostly for patients with visual impairments or severe neurological injuries. We met one rainy afternoon when he was reading Hemingway to the elderly woman in the room next door. His voice was low and warm, rhythmic, like a lullaby I never had. Noah never asked why I was there. He never looked at me like I was a tragedy on wheels. We started with small talk: books, music, coffee preferences. One day I asked him, "Aren't you curious about my past?" He smiled. "I figure if it needs to be told, you'll tell it. I'm just here for the present, if you want to share it." Each of those people, each of those bonds, slowly stitched together tears in me I thought were beyond repair. They didn't try to replace what my parents and brother left behind. They simply didn't leave me. And maybe that's what love is. No explanations, no demands to be right, just staying when someone needs you most. Sophia encouraged me to write a letter, not to send, but to release. Not for reconnection, she said, for closure. And so I wrote, just once. Each word felt carved out of bone. I don't need your apology. I don't need your understanding. I just need you to know I'm still alive, not because of you, but in spite of you. On my 30th birthday, Lindsay brought me cake. Monica brought lavender from the garden, and Noah read me a passage from Wild by Cheryl Strayed. Healing is brutal. It demands you cut away what's dead so the rest can survive. I looked around my small room, and for the first time, I didn't feel alone. I no longer longed for my mother's embrace. I didn't need my father to say he was proud. I didn't need Brandon to apologize. I have a family, not the one that birthed me, but the one I chose, and who chose to stay. Maybe I'll always remember what I've lost. Maybe there will still be nights when I wake up gasping from memories. But now I'm not alone. I don't have to pretend I'm okay anymore. I'm allowed to hurt, and I'm allowed to be loved without conditions. Healing isn't about erasing the past. It's learning how to walk forward in your own way with every scar you carry. I, Emily Carter, don't need a house anymore. I have a home inside the hearts of others. And for the first time, I know this with certainty. I get to stay. It's been 2 years since my world was turned upside down. 2 years since I fell on that cold wooden deck during the birthday party of a brother once worshipped like a saint in our family. 2 years since every illusion about kinship, unconditional love, the idea of a place to return to, shattered in a single moment with a fall and a silence that still haunts me. But 2 years was enough to learn something else. I don't need a mother to know I'm lovable. I don't need a father to validate my worth. I don't need a brother to remind me to try harder. I just need myself and the people I chose to keep. I used to believe that being paralyzed meant your life was cut in half. The truth? You only lose half your body, but you can recover your entire self if you're brave enough to dig through the ruins others left behind in you. I started sharing my story. At first, just small talks with other spinal injury patients, people in free fall, drowning in thoughts like, my life is over. I didn't bring slogans. I didn't offer motivation. I brought truth, that I had been them, and I survived. Not perfectly, not heroically, but fully, in my own way. I partnered with organizations focused on mental health and trauma recovery. I led workshops with teachers, community coordinators, and especially young people. Kids like I once was, labeled difficult simply for feeling deeply, asking questions, or reacting out loud. I shared my childhood not to accuse, but to name something our society avoids naming: emotional abuse within families. It was at a mobility recovery event that I met Thomas, a man who didn't ask what had happened to me, but still recognized that I had survived. He was a physical therapist from a partner hospital. We crossed paths at a breathing session, one I hadn't even planned to attend, but Monica insisted, "You don't have to participate, just sit and listen. Who knows? Maybe you'll like it." I didn't fall for the class. I fell for his gaze, not pitying, not avoiding, just seeing me fully with no need for subtitles. We didn't start like in the movies, no moonlit walks, no dramatic first touch, just scattered conversations after long days. Him remembering I don't drink sweet tea, me sending him an old song, and him listening to it on repeat the next day. Turns out, love doesn't need fireworks, just one person who stays when everyone else has gone. I didn't tell him everything all at once. I let him unpack it slowly, gently, like someone peeling gauze from an old wound. And he never touched anything I wasn't ready to share. One night, I told him, "I don't even know if I still know what love is." He said, "Then let me help you relearn it. No pressure. You don't have to be good at it." And my biological family, I don't know where they are now. I don't know what they think when they see my name in health magazines or hear me speak at conferences. And honestly, I don't care anymore. I used to crave a phone call, a letter, a simple, "We were wrong." Now, not anymore. Not because I've forgiven them, but because I've outgrown the need to. I no longer need their approval to know I'm enough, because I am. I always was. One day, a young girl, paralyzed from a car crash, asked me, "Do you ever wish you could go back?" I looked at the girl, saw the tears still clinging to her lashes, the pain still raw in her eyes, the fear she hadn't yet found words for. And I said, "No, I don't want to go back, because if I did, I might try all over again to make them love me." And now I know, love isn't something you can beg for. Today, I live in a small apartment, just enough. I do the work I love, standing beside people who've walked through their own fires. I love someone who doesn't see my wheelchair as a limitation. I have a small circle of people who stayed, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And I know maybe I'll never walk like before, never run up 2 steps at a time, never dance barefoot in the rain like I did when I was little. But I have something many people who still walk don't: freedom in my soul. If you've made it all the way here, thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. I didn't share it to be pitied. I shared it because I know there are so many people out there still suffering in silence, like I once did. Maybe you still walk just fine. Maybe you still smile like nothing's wrong. But I know there are falls inside us that hurt more than anything the outside world can see. If this story touched something in you, leave a comment below. Tell me a piece of your story, or just write, "I'm still here," so that someone, somewhere, in their darkest moment will know they are not alone. And if you believe stories like this need to be told, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, because I'll be back with more stories about ordinary people who survived in extraordinary ways. We can't change the past, but we can help each other move through the present with a little more kindness, a little more humanity. And if this world hasn't said your name yet, then let me be the first. I see you. You're still here. And you are worthy of love.